Thank you, Chair. And I think first thing is to thank all that have attended this hearing today. I think it's, the crucial point of this hearing is that we understand obviously more about the shambles that appears to be corporate governance within RTE, but that coming out of this, that we have a stronger RTE, a more transparent RTE, and an RTE that has fairer working conditions. I suppose my first question, just during the week, we have had statements from the top 10 presenters about their fees, but I want to ask whether any of you are aware of top-ups or side deals to those outside of the top 10 presenters. I'm conscious we don't have the head of HR here today. I'm also conscious that we're getting answers that are very individualised about what people individually knew as opposed to collectively from the board. So if I could just get a yes or no answer with regards to the question as to whether you're aware of top-ups or side deals from any other worker within RTE outside of the top 10. Mr. Coveney, starting with you.
No, what I would say is there are individual presenters or journalists who may have relationships that are completely distinct from RTE,
okay.
but not anything resembling this.
No, I'm not aware of any.
No, I'm not aware of any.
Nothing resembling this.
No.
I'm not aware of any.
Okay, and I have three sets of specific questions from Ms O'Leary, from Mr Collins and from Ms Nirahalig, but I suppose, firstly want to ask Robert Short, as the staff member on the board, what do you believe now needs to happen within RTE to move this forward, this awful crisis that has engulfed the national broadcaster? What needs to happen to the executive? And I'm conscious that I have another set of questions, but I'm sure you have something to say on this matter.
So what needs to happen to the
executive and within RTE to try and move, I suppose, reinstill confidence in the public broadcaster, but also reassure staff now as well that these issues are going to be comprehensively dealt with?
Well, I don't think we're at the end of this, and by virtue of all of the questions that all of you rightly have, we're not at the end of it. But I do think that we have, and starting with our own actions on the Audit and Risk Committee, we have put a train of information as soon as we've had it into the public domain, and we are trying to get to the bottom of it. In terms of the broader job that needs to be done in terms of rebuilding trust in the organisation and rebuilding trust for staff in the organisation. Many of my colleagues have spoken far more eloquently than I could about the anger that they felt, and we all saw the protests yesterday, but my colleagues are also acutely aware they need to keep doing their jobs, and they're committed to keep doing their jobs, and I think that's going to be a key part of rebuilding trust in RTE. But in order to do that, we also need your assistance, because I think the goal here is to regain trust in public service broadcasting and to regain trust in RTE, and we need to continue to try to find out everything that needs to be found out until you guys have no more questions to ask of us.
Okay.
And I know, as a member of the staff on the board, I'll be continuing to work towards getting whatever information is there that needs to be got out as quickly as possible.
Okay, thank you very much. Ms O'Leary, I suppose as commercial director, I have to ask, is it good enough that you can't recall the detail of the invoices, that there's no paper trail within your office? And particularly when we learned from the Grant Thornton report that those invoices account for 70% of the value of the purchases going through the barter account in 2022. And I suppose as well, what does it say about the dynamics within the organisation of RTE that you act on instruction and don't ask questions?
Okay, well, the first thing I would say is that, yes, these two payments represented 70% of the transactions, because the barter account is normally relatively small transactions, which would come to my office. I'm not normally somebody who raises invoices. That's not part of what I do. So this was an unusual situation where I was asked by the Director General to raise invoices or to advise my assistant to raise invoices for NKM.
So is it acceptable then that you wouldn't even communicate with the Chief Financial Officer if it's unusual for your role to be raising invoices at all?
Well, the way I understood it at the time was that, as I said, that there was no budget, the Director General didn't have a budget at her disposal, and she asked me whether to use the barter account.
So I think what we're hearing is this kind of story of Chinese walls here, that there's divisions working in silos and not communicating with each other, which reflects an utter dysfunction as an executive if an unusual transaction has never even brought to the attention of the executive. I suppose to the Chief Financial Officer, you said a number of minutes ago that the first, if I picked you up correctly, that the first you understood of these transactions was in March of this year. Are you saying that there was no inkling at all in 2022 that there was some unusual transactions taking place in the RTE organisation, within RTE, that were financial in nature?
These transactions were approved by the Director General.
So you had no knowledge whatsoever, no inkling whatsoever?
From a control point of view, I took comfort from the fact that they were approved by the Director General.
Okay, well, there's an ambiguity to your answer there. And I suppose the question is, we see from the Grant Thornton report that the barter account was previously outside of the financial statements, but was brought into the balance sheet. So how, and this is 2 years ago, if I understand it correctly. So how could it be the case that if the barter account was on the balance sheet for the past 2 years, that you had no knowledge last year of these events, and that it took until March this year for action to be taken?
Yeah, let me just clarify that. So the barter account did sit outside the balance sheet up until when I joined, and when I joined I brought the barter account onto the balance sheet as part of the 2019 annual accounts process. I would have done that in March.
But when did you know, though?
So if you just let me finish here, sorry. So the manner in which they were brought on was as a year-end adjustment. They weren't reflected in the monthly management accounts. So hence, in 2022, they were posted into the accounts as part of the year-end accounts when they were being prepared in February, March of 23. The auditors examined it then, and that's when it was brought to my attention. It came on my radar.
So your department had no knowledge of this last year at all, is what you're saying?
Well, they would have seen transactions going through, but the fact
but they
that
didn't. They didn't feed them to yourself as Chief Financial Officer.
They didn't bring them as the fact that they were approved by the Director General was the internal control.
Well, I think that raises very serious questions about the operation of the Finance Department. If there's no follow up to yourself, if these were unusual transactions, I want to ask about the end of contract payments, and I think to many RT staff this concept of out of contract payments for certain individuals, and we know it's not to all staff, and that a way had to be found to offset the end of contract payment is a real kick in the teeth. But I just want to understand the nature of end of contract payments. Are they a standard part of the contract negotiated with an agent on behalf of a contractor providing services to RTE?
In my experience, they're not, no.
So who has end of contract payments as part of their contracts in RTE?
Well, at present, nobody has them.
Other than Ryan Tubridy?
That was his 2015 to 20 contract.
So that is the only time that we've had an end of contract clause within
I believe in the past there have been end of contract payments in contracts, but certainly at the moment there's nothing that I'm aware of.
Okay. I suppose to the chair, and I'm conscious you're only here, in the role a few short months, and obviously you face a gargantuan task in reinstilling confidence in the public broadcaster, in the national broadcaster. Do you accept you're presiding over a dysfunctional executive?
I accept we have a very much a cultural issue within the organisation, and you can see it. This is why we're here.
Okay.
And it's to your point. It's a culture that's in there that accepts that. Well, that's approved by the DG, so I'm not going to talk about it. And I don't think, and I think all of the people here would agree now that that's wrong, and that's for the board. That's and for me, I'm only there 7 months, but for me, that was the shocking part of it as well, that there wasn't the conversations that we all would assume would happen. But each of them in their own individual area, as you said, it's siloed.
And can I ask about the business model in RTE, where we have on one side somebody in a fixed term contract who has to go through an arduous contract review group process to try and become a permanent employee, and on the other side then we have this opaque system for negotiating with, you know, quote unquote talent in RTE. Do you believe that that is the right model? Like, I think it's important to say we've only seen two major defections from RTE since Century Radio came on the scene 30 years ago, and yet RTE has effectively paid enormous sums to a very small number of people, and of course, you know, bent over backwards to facilitate, you know, one individual. Do you believe that that model is sustainable, and does it need to be changed?
I absolutely believe that it's something we definitely have to look at, and I would argue that RTE is sometimes bidding against itself because there isn't a market there. It's certainly something that the incoming DG and myself have talked about, and that is okay. Along with the issue of agents.
And Chairman, just my final question is just to the chair of RTE. Like, given what you've said there about, you know, effectively having a dysfunctional executive, and that's why you're here today, what now needs to happen? Like, surely it's not just about a new DG being in place. And I personally am a bit concerned about, you know, a witch hunt against one particular individual. You know, what are the systemic changes that need to take place to get turn the ship around effectively?
Yeah, you know, the culture comes from the top down, and you know, there's a role for the executive board now to actually own what the issues are here and discuss it with the board, and we have to talk that through in terms of how that has permeated right down into the organisation, exactly what you're talking about there. And again, I go back, this is a people organisation, and there's a resource of people in RTE that are the epitome of public service broadcasting. Like, you can't buy it. You know, this is built up over the life since the foundation of Radio Éireann. This has built up, and we have to respect that and understand that we have jewels here in the crown in terms of what we have to build on. But we have to get the function, the function of the organisation, the management of the organisation has to seriously be addressed.
Okay, thank you. And I know Mr. Coveney wants to respond as well.
Just to wrap up.
Yeah, if I just can say, I was in RTE when the last scandal of this, well, different circumstances, but it was very substantial, and the public trust was very damaged, and after the Mission to Pray fiasco, frankly. And what I would say, just to echo, it's obviously not about one man and someone coming in, but when Kevin Backhurst joined the last time, he came in to pick up a newsroom, to rebuild trust in our journalism, to rebuild confidence of our journalists and confidence in investigative reporting, confidence in so in the choice that the chair has made and the board have made around incoming Director General, I think he's pretty well equipped for the task at hand. I mean, obviously it's not about one person, but he has some experience there, and there's a lot to be done. You know, all of us have a lot to do and a lot to reflect on.
Okay, Mr. Covey, I'm just going to stop you there, if that's okay, because I need to come back to members. Thank you.